Barbara, would you like to let us know what anything came out of your discussions?
Well, I think the first thing that was noted was the vast subject of Catholic social teaching. You know, it covers just about anything and everything. So it's a vast subject to talk about. And also talk to people in the churches about Catholic social teaching. Most of them wouldn't have a clue what you're on about. So, you know, that needs perhaps to be addressed in each parish. With regard, most of the thing we talked about is the plastic and climate change. How do you stop supermarkets from packaging just about anything and everything in plastic? Some people have unwrapped all their plastic and handed all the plastic bags back to the supermarket outside the door to make a point. And some supermarkets are reducing their single-use plastic anyway. Some councils collaborate with their man in the street to so that they can go around and collect rubbish off the you know, that's just been thrown down in the streets. And perhaps we need to go back to the old days when that kind of behavior, throwing rubbish on the streets, was unacceptable. You were stopped in the street by other members of the public and say, that is not acceptable, pick it up and we'll be tied you if you didn't. You know, perhaps we need to address, you know, point out to more and more people in various different ways that antisocial behaviour, and that includes throwing rubbish on the ground, is you know, people just do things without thinking because that's the way it's done. Everybody does it. So we need to address that concept that you can do these things because everybody does it. And I think we didn't get much past that.
Okay, thanks very much. Chris, have you?
Yeah, purely by chance, I had been down to Romero House yesterday and spent the day with CAFOD, and in the evening we went to a lobby in the House of Parliament where we met 20 or 30 MPs. It was hard to keep track of how many were there. So we started off talking about getting involved in politics. It was Grant had said he's still teaching his sixth form. Catholic social teaching is touched on in lower school, but what about the young adults, getting them involved? We need to get initiatives for youngsters like that have tangible outcomes, things they can do and they can see a result from. Sister Teresa mentioned writing to MPs, something that she does continually, has done recently on the freedom to protest new legislation, which is clearly from our point of view very appalling. Contributing to the needy, helping the hungry via food banks. She said that St Thomas More School in Nuneaton had been involved in during COVID in feeding groups of people who were disadvantaged. We're all worried about the climate, but we're mostly worried about the fact that the government has targets but no step forward to achieve those targets. No plan. We mentioned briefly the caste system that Sister has some experience of. The fact that even in this country, those in the lowest caste, the Dalits, are badly treated by higher caste people. and we need to respect the dignity of all human beings, but mindsets are hard to change. I put together 2 things that you put on your list about fake news and artificial intelligence. There was a story in the Times today, apparently of an explosion, a big explosion next to the Pentagon. It was put out on Facebook and Twitter, and it was a big plunge in the stock market in America until it was finally worked out that it was a completely fake story. Grant then mentioned that he'd had a similar problem on a much smaller scale with some of his students who the day before an exam had a panic online, and somebody said, "Oh, we haven't been taught enough about this particular subject." But of course that spread across the entire cohort of students doing it, and he had to get in early the following morning to remind them that they had been taught. It might be 1 or 2 people hadn't done enough, had missed a lesson or something, but it was there, but too late to an extent, because the panic had been spread by 1 individual. And social media causes lots of problems. I think that was about as far as we got.
What do you know about AI, Chris?
So
What do you know about AI?
Only what I'm reading online, Jerry, at the moment, but obviously it can be used. Sorry?
You being a computer man.
Yeah, but it's far newer than my time in IT. I go back to punch cards and paper tape.
Yeah.
I'll let you off.
Thanks, Chris. I disappeared there. My connections aren't working very well.
Right.
The next group I think is Jim. Jim?
I didn't know I was facilitating a group,
Oh, right.
so this is news to me.
Is there someone else in your group who'd like to say something? I don't know.
Well, we did have a problem in our group. It was only 3 of us, and one of us, their microphone wasn't working. So it was essentially a conversation between Elizabeth and myself, and I had to exercise a few muscles towards the end. So I'm not sure whether any sign language type communication was made between Elizabeth and Stephen. But Elizabeth, you might perhaps want to say something. I don't know.
Shall we do a bit of tag team, Jim? Is that all right?
Yeah.
We'll do a
Yeah.
double header. Yeah. So because there was some things that a lot of the barriers. Yeah, we agreed with everyone else that Catholic social teaching is one of the best kept secrets, and people in parishes don't know about it. It is good that it's been taught more explicitly in schools now, and that it's on the diocesan vision explicitly, and you can find stuff on the website about it. So that's quite good. It's improvement, but most people in parishes don't know. So I think Jim made some really good points that I think we both agree that people need to believe that they can bring about change. Because lots of people want to do things, but they're not sure how to do things. And Sister will know this, Sister Edith on here, that we need to invite people almost explicitly to do things, whether it's contributing to CAFOD or putting up, like we've made a display about how to get help in the parish if you're struggling, because that came out of what some of the parishioners were saying. But also, even or collecting for the local food bank, whatever you can do, but people need to be, and this is like people in parishes need to be guided to do that. And it doesn't always have to be the man in the pulpit, is what you said, Jim, wasn't it? We need to look at our leadership in our churches and our priests. What's the word? We're blessed because in our parishes we have priests. The 2 parishes I'm involved in, we've got priests who are open to people taking initiative and will happily let us organise things. But we need to make that a little bit more explicit in places. I'm also part of Citizens UK, so we're an alliance of faith, community and education institutions, and we campaign on social justice, and we'd love to get more direct support from the diocese with that bigger picture, that is. But it would really help. I think it'd be beneficial for the diocese and for ourselves as well in the organisation. Was there anything else, Jim?
I suppose bringing on from the leadership point, it's about convincing people that, as you say, they can bring about change for them, but people very often need to believe in themselves. They need to be empowered, because they can do an awful lot, but probably don't realise that.
Yeah.
And traditionally, and it varies from parish to parish, I know, but some haven't been encouraged to believe that they are and are called to be agents of change. And the world of Catholic social teaching is both scary and exciting, but it's certainly rich. There's a lot in there. And there is therefore the need for education. What is the place of CST in journey of faith content, in seminary training, and the like? Because it's about getting these messages out there and imparting the importance of them, as we heard from the many examples from Phil earlier, that there's a long list of things on the negative side, and the world could look so much different if the positive side, which is presented by the values of CST, were actually out there. And perhaps there is need for a slight change of language as well, because at the end of the day, we're talking about morality. And instead of saying, well, it's good to give to charity, it's good to give to a food bank, and it is, but why aren't we also saying it's immoral that society has to have food banks, for example?
Right, well, thank you. There's one other group we had, Father Jerry, Sean and myself were in a group. So, Sean, Jerry, would you going to summarise?
Yeah, okay, I'll say a bit about it. Yeah, well, we're very fortunate to have Sean in our group, who is very dedicated and has worked and knows a lot about Catholic social teaching because he's Franciscan background, and he's on a kind of crusade to make it better known in his parish and wherever he can. He's been trying to drip feed messages to his parish, as I understand about it, trying to get them thinking in that kind of way. And I guess perhaps one of the things perhaps that just came up at the end of the last report was, it's getting people to think more deeply about these things. That it's okay, it's like the food bank thing. Well, why do we have them? What's the situation that's causing this poverty, increasing poverty in our society? And it's wages, it's all kinds of things that need looking at. What else do we talk about? Really, the obligation of the laity to take these matters in hand. It is one of the. It's not sort of it's the leader's job, but people in their own selves and their own baptism and their own discipleship have responsibility to work for the kingdom in different ways that it happens. And there's a bit of, we mentioned asylum seekers as well. Well, there was quite a lot. I was probably avoiding this bit. There's quite a bit about priest sermons actually as well. But the nature of homilies and sermons and why. Well, we weren't saying why this should be something that is somehow addressed or somehow is in the should be part of the preaching of the church, if you like. Obviously, obviously it's easier when occasions demand it, some particular local thing going on, Racial Justice Sunday or Day of Prayer for refugees. There's all these peace days. There's all these kind of things that are dotted throughout the year, and to try and pull some attention to them, is quite important. But there wasn't appreciation how rather difficult it is to do that. And there must be things outside of, I would think, homilies and just that 10 minutes, spot in church. We need formation, finding a way of formation. I think as somebody said, I think some of the terminology in the language, big words like subsidiarity and all these things. I mean, they're not immediately obvious, but they have to be explained. We could find ways of better. But I think it's good that there's a big push in, I think, in the schools. Somebody mentioned to bring Catholic social teaching into the RE in schools, even in primary schools. Anybody else got anything? Sean, would you like to say something, or Phil?
The thing I like to say is that I think, as I said earlier on, it's unfair to expect the clergy to have to take the lead in everything. I mean, the laity are the church. We are the church as well, and so we have a responsibility to preach the gospel. And Catholic social teaching is part of the gospel. And so we really do have this responsibility. And there are many, many, many laity, I know I just met a few this evening, who are highly educated, very vocal, who should be able to carry on with this. And we don't need permission. The Compendium of Social Teaching tells us that we don't need permission from anybody else to get on and do it. Just go on and do it. And the other thing I mentioned was all this, in my view, is connected very much with the Beatitudes. If we want to form a beatitudinal church, then Catholic social teaching is a large element of how the Beatitudes go, And there's an awful lot of people who aren't Catholics who appreciate the Beatitudes. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi said that if it was ever possible to prove that Jesus Christ never existed, at least we would have the Sermon on the Mount. Very impressive. He was impressed by that. And the other thing I talked about a little bit. I think Jenny and Phil were very kind because they let me rabbit on, and I do like rabbiting on. And talking about artificial intelligence, my intelligence has been artificial for a good many years. But the one thing that I have a problem with at the moment is this notion of subsidiarity, where I think the voices of ordinary people are being ignored more and more. Things like the EU, for instance, hyperglobalization, where great corporations are just using the workers now just as part and parcel of a unit of production, and workers don't seem to have much say in things. But subsidiarity is simply letting people have their say and letting people have the responsibility for governing in the areas where they are competent to do so. And so I see subsidiarity just not being ignored all over the place by politicians and the big organisations.
Church as well, Sean. It's a big issue in the church as well, because one of the synodality things is about actually listening and involving people. And I think, even the clergy don't feel involved sometimes, in a hierarchical church, that we are not consulted. And I suppose if we're not consulted by the hierarchy, we're probably not going to consult our people. It's a leaven in the whole lump, really, I think. But we can't it's difficult, isn't it? You can't say how it fits into the pattern of our church life. Something's got to change there, I think.
I remember one of our...
Sorry.
Sorry, I just want to say...
Can I just bring it?
Yes, go ahead.
I'll give you a chance in a moment, but thank you both very much. I did say we can spend a few minutes to respond to any of these ideas that have or any of these reports what people have said. I want to respond to something as well. Sean, in his parish or parishes, produces a newsletter about the Catholic social teaching, or whatever, for his is it 2 parishes, Sean, or 3?
Well, it's on. Well, we have 2 parishes, Dudley and
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
Well, what I was thinking
all
is,
of these are on our website, our parish website. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was thinking is we might be able to develop that idea across the whole archdiocese. No need to reinvent the wheel. If I'll negotiate with Sean later on, and then we'll see. Maybe that's one of the fruits of this discussion, something positive that we can give to parishes. But what I would like to hear is, anyone want to come back on any of the things that we've already just been discussing? We've still got a few minutes to be able to do that. And please don't worry, on my screen, I've closed my screen because I don't want to disappear again completely.
Our parish, my home parish, we've got a WhatsApp group for campaigns and social justice amongst it, and it started just with 6 of us in the pandemic, and we just add people in. So that sort of started as like helping out your neighbours, but now if there's campaigns that you were saying about, you know, at the moment the refugee bill that the government were proposing would put a lot of migrant children of refugees behind bars, including some of the kids in our schools. So you know, that might be I'm planning to share that to the group after this meeting. So if they're particularly, you know, to encourage people to sign petitions, as one of the other people had said as well. So there's lots of little things that we can learn from, and maybe that's something for a future meeting, is actually let's have a look at those little things that we can do and how we can learn from each other.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's really nice. Anyone else?
Elizabeth, what's your parish? Which is your parish?
So my home parish is St Gregory's in Bearwood, and then I also go to St Francis in Handsworth once a month with Sister, who's also on the call.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to? Well,
I like the
Chris?
idea of relieving the clergy from the homilies from time to time, because if what we get in many homilies is a rehash of the gospel story, maybe linking it to the first reading, maybe not. But on a 3-year cycle, we're going to hear the same thing relatively regularly. So if we could bring up something that was socially relevant, maybe that had a hint of something in that week's readings, and do a homily around it, and perhaps somebody within the congregation could be invited to do it. What do you think, Jerry?
Well, it's an interesting idea. What do you think?
2 observations on that, if I may.
Thanks, Jim.
Firstly, I used to know, I've lost touch with her now. I used to know Pat Jones. I think she worked for the Bishops' Conference many years ago, and was also for a period of time the acting director of CAFOD, and I think she may have done something up at Hushore as well, I'm not sure. But she was sometimes asked to run or in some way get involved in running retreats for clergy. And I remember her telling the story once around the time of the Iraq War, I'm not sure which one. And she invited the clergy there to indicate who would feel confident preaching on that issue. And the answer was very few. And I think there is perhaps an element of that in why we don't get the readings of the day being used as a framework to address current moral issues. Not necessarily because they don't want to, and I don't mean not necessarily because they can't. That would sort of insult their intelligence. It's about perhaps not being the norm, not being able to, in the sense of, I don't know whether that's training or what one is used to. I don't know. We have that wonderful phrase, don't we, in one of the beginning of, is it the Constitution of the Church out of Vatican II, about the signs of the times, the joys and the griefs of the people. And there is a real need now for, there's a dearth of hope in the world, and that includes, I think, a good many believers as well, or they're struggling with this. And if there's ever a time perhaps for these contemporary issues to be held up to the mirror of our faith, to social teaching, to Christ's message, it's now. So yes, I would endorse entirely the idea of weaving that in, the idea of the laity getting up there and doing it. I personally wouldn't have a problem with at all. But yes, that's a big step. But we had a Cameroonian priest in our parish with us for a few years while he was studying at Maryvale. And he told me once that very often at home, as in Cameroon, depending on the reading, he would think, I'm not very well qualified to unite some of these messages in today's gospel with people's lived everyday experience. And he would call on a member of the congregation to give their perspective from the point of view of somebody who has a family, perhaps has work or is struggling, whatever their situation. And I thought, well, that's not a million miles from Chris's suggestion, the way it's, what is it the Jesuits call it? The importance of the lived experience, getting in to recognize your spirit-led feelings and help people accordingly.
Is there anyone else who'd like to say anything, or can I bring it to an end with something here then? This is something, my deanery is North Staffordshire. We're the furthest north in the diocese. And at the moment, we've been engaged in this diocesan vision, unfolding God's plan. I don't know if this is, it's going to be, if it isn't already, in every parish or every deanery. But this has come from the Archdiocese Office for Mission, called Unfolding God's Plan. It's a series of 6 sessions for parishes to go through these things, and it does the vision, diocesan vision of the Archbishop. We're asked to put that forward in our minds to learn about it and to work towards it. One of the sessions deals with how we are evangelizing in our parish, how the formation, and we're asking parishioners to look at those things, liturgy and worship as well, and outreach, social outreach, those 4 things. With it, all the time we're thinking as well with young people and families. However, those 4 things, evangelization, formation, liturgy and worship, social outreach. And if this is done in every parish, which it isn't, It is in my area, it isn't, but that's how we're doing it. But our vision is to, this is the statement, our vision is to be a Catholic diocese, faithful to the mission entrusted to us by Jesus Christ, full of missionary disciples who work together co-responsibly in vibrant communities of faith, joyful in their service of God and neighbour. And I would imagine we do have vibrant communities. We do have vibrant communities of faith dotted around the diocese, but they're very small. And this is my experience in my area. We do have people who are working together, but not very many at the moment. And this is the Archbishop's vision he's holding out to us. So maybe that's a message of hope, that if we do pray and we do work for these things, we will eventually do that. And the final thing I want to say is, I often come back to what's called the Romero prayer. St. Oscar Romero, I think it was a Canadian bishop who wrote this prayer, but it's from Romero's sayings. And one of the things he said, we are not master builders. Our job is just to do whatever is in front of us. We will not see the whole picture. We will, so building the kingdom of God, if you like, in our communities, we're not going to see the fullness of that, but we are called to be workers. And so, we have to do that cheerfully as best we can. I want to thank you all for being here and participating. And I suppose that's it. Father Jerry will close the meeting.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Phil, for presenting the topic to us and making us think and reflect on what's going on. Thank you for the last bit. My sound went all funny. I missed some of the stuff earlier on. But anyway, just thank you for the last, particularly the Romero prayer. That we can get very frustrated because it's not all happening and we're not all doing it and everybody else is not doing it. But we are not master builders. We're doing our best to do what we can where we are, and trying to be responsive to the Lord and to the message and our calling, and also those things that the Archbishop has pointed out in his vision. So thank everybody tonight for coming together. I think it is good to come together from different parts of the diocese and different situations to reflect on these things. So thank you very much for doing that. And thank Janet for as always for putting things together, and thank Phil very much for what he's done to help us this evening. So should we say the grace together as we end? And thank you. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the community of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forever. Amen.
Amen.